All right, there we go. I think we're back in business. Yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. So tonight, what I was going to do 2 weeks ago is I was going to talk about Mel Brooks and Quentin Tarantino, which is an incredibly weird combination of a show. Both of them are very important to the film industry as they really shaped how a lot of us make movies today, especially Mel Brooks because he created a whole new line of comedy genre. So I'm going to talk about him for about half hour, and then I'm going to talk about Tarantino for about a half hour, and then I'll probably take a 10-minute break before I get into the next segment, which would have been what I'm talking about right now, which is Back to the Future. Back to the Future has been one of my favorites since I was probably about 10 years old, because, I mean, you just can't go wrong with Back to the Future. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on Mel Brooks. He is one of my all-time favorite filmmakers. He was actually born in Brooklyn, New York. He had 3 very important films that people know. Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, and Spaceballs. High Anxiety is another one. I'm trying to think of a few other ones that I might know. But those 4 I know are definitely really big with him. So another thing, too, that I didn't know until it was like my first year in college, that he actually wrote for the show Get Smart. And I don't think he had anything to do with the remake of Get Smart back in like 2008, 2009. If he had, then I think the movie would have been a lot better than it was. Don't get me wrong, I love the movie. You know, I remember watching it when I remember going to see it in theaters, and I liked it. But I mean, that was like 10, 11-year-old me. You know, so there's no telling. I haven't seen the movie since then. It's been so long. But it's got Terrence Stamp. Does it have Terrence Stamp? No, I'm thinking of Yes Man. I'm getting myself confused. I just know it has Steve Carell and I believe Anne Hathaway. But I haven't seen that movie in like 10 years. So I should probably try and see it. The show I never saw. It was back in the 60s. I don't think I've ever even found like a streaming service that I could watch the show on. I could probably find it on YouTube. I don't really know. I'm sure there's something out there that I could find it on. I mean, Hulu, Netflix, one of these streaming services will more than likely probably have it, especially Amazon Prime. Actually, you know what? Prime might actually even have it. So there's no really telling where I could find it. All I have to do is look it up, but I got too much going on in my hands. Not really. I just say that to make it seem like I'm actually doing things with my life. So before, we had Monty Python. And that was kind of Saturday Night Live-ish. Before Saturday Night Live, it was British comedy. And it was also spoof comedy. So their movie, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, came out in I think it was 72 or 73. It was a year after Blazing Saddles came out. So the interesting thing about Mel Brooks is that he's actually one of the very few people who have received an Oscar, an Emmy, a Tony, and a Grammy. His Grammy, very first one, was for Best Spoken Comedy Album in 1999 for the recording of The 2,000-Year-Old Man in the year 2000 with Carl Reiner. So Blazing Saddles, that one came out, I'm pretty sure it's 1972. So that one is obviously a Western spoof with Gene Wilder, who I absolutely love Gene Wilder. And Cleavon Little, who played Bart. Gene Wilder played the kid. So it's a town where it's literally, so if you watch the film, everybody in the town's name is Johnson. And I'm going to give you a little layout of the film. So what it is Cleavon Little's character, Bart, he works on a railroad. And he and one of his friends have to go get some parts. And they're going on the weird little train thing. I don't really know how to explain it. But they hit a patch of quicksand. So they get stuck. And then the sheriff and whoever is in charge of the railroad, they come out there to supposedly save them, but really they're just saving the train cart because that's like, I think he said it was like $450 right there. And so Bart's friend looks at him and he goes, they're going to leave us here to die. Charlie, that's his name. That's his buddy's name's Charlie. So he's like, take it easy, Charlie. My foot's on the rail. So he walks up and they get out. Well, then the guys, obviously, they couldn't care less. Could care less. I don't really know however you phrase that. I really don't care. Anyway, they didn't care about Bart and Charlie. This is set in the 1870s, so right after the Civil War. And for those who don't know who Cleavon Little is or never seen the movie, Cleavon Little's character, he is black. So it's it's got a lot of racism in the film, which is why today it could not be made. But anyway, Cleavon Bart hits the sheriff over the head with a shovel because sometimes you just got to do that. So he goes and they're set to hang him, but then they decide that they want to go into this little town, Rockridge, and take it over so they could build more railroads down there. So what they do is they send Bart over to be the sheriff so that it drives everybody out of the town. But he figures out what they're doing. So he tells the town about it, and he's like, look, I know you guys don't like me, but I'm trying to help you guys out because your town's about to be just gonski. And then they send Mungo in, and that's like one of my all-time favorite parts. Mungo is this enormous man who is sent there to scare the sheriff out, and it doesn't scare him. The best line from that movie is Mongo is inside the bar, and he's beating everybody up, and I think he has them in a corner or something like that. I'm trying to remember. And Bart comes in, all Warner Brothers Bugs Bunny-ish. He's got like an outfit on for male, and he comes in, candygram for Mungo, and he's standing there, and he goes, candygram for Mungo, and Mungo like candy. Gives him the box of candy, and the thing explodes on him. So then he like gets Mongo and he puts him up in a cage. That's when they find out that they're trying to drive Bart out and trying to make the town drive out as well. Because Mongo like tells it. He's like, why is the governor asking for your release? And he's like, oh, well, they are trying to drive you out of the town so they can put railroads in. So they're like, oh, okay. So Bart and the kid, I can't remember Gene Wilder's character's name for some reason. So they come up with an idea. They build this fake town, and the sheriff and some other guys ride in. They try to scare him off. They think that they're actually getting him, but really they're just like blowing up the fake decals, which is it's set like in that the town is actually like a set, like it's just wood setups, and they're just cardboard. They're just like wood cutouts of the townspeople, and they think that they're actually killing them. And it's not until that they knock everything down that then they're like, oh my God, this is a fake, and they realize it. And so by then it's too late because the townspeople have already laced the entire town with, what do you want to call it? Dynamite. And they blow them out. And then they break the fourth wall. They go into, I guess you could say they break the fourth wall. They go into the studios where the film was made. And they're having a fight. And then Mel Brooks is usually almost always in his movies. Like in Blazing Saddles, he was the governor. And then, I'm trying to remember the ending here. It's been a minute since I've seen it. It's been a couple months. It's like one of my favorite movies. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on it. So what it is they decide not to, hang him, but they let him go because he got rid of a corrupt leader, Hedy Lamarr. And then he just like rides off into the sunset he legit rides his horse and then gets into a limo and goes. And that's the end of the movie. That's it in a nutshell. But where'd it go? Here we go. So Blazing Saddles is one of the first pioneer spoof films. Supposedly, this movie officially marks the first time the sound of farting has ever been used in the film, which is what they did was around a campfire before they sent out Mongo, as they were all eating a thing of beans. Yeah, that's what it was. Because Mel Brooks, he said, they came up with the idea after watching numerous westerns where cowboys only ate and drank black coffee and plates of beans. that it wouldn't be a good combination. The idea of the film came from an original story outline by Andrew Bergman, which Mel Brooks described as hip talk, 1974 talk and expressions, happening in 1874. I don't know what my mom just told me. Okay, anyway. She said, oh, okay. I don't know how I missed that. Mongo was Alex Karras, who played for the Detroit Lions and also as Webster's dad in the 1980s. So thank you, Mom, for contributing to the radio show. So when they were coming up with the script, Brooks was immediately hooked on it. And he told them to expand on it. And he hired a couple other writers with Bergman. And he said, don't write a polite script. Like, you can't. And so this was filmed with Warner Brothers. And he had conflicts over the content with Warner Brothers. They didn't like the constant use of the N-word, which it is consistently used in the movie. They didn't like the farting scene. And they didn't like... That's the other thing, too, is that Mongo punches a horse. He gets to town... and he just straight up punches a horse. And there was like no need for him to punch a horse, but he was like, you know what? This horse needs a good right hook. And he just knocks that sucker out. So that Warner Brothers didn't like that either. They also had a couple other issues, but Brooks had a contract still with them to give them final content control, which it was kind of hard to... Oh, no, sorry, I read that wrong. He had final content control. So he declined to make any substantial changes. He said that with the N-word, he received consistent support for its use from Richard Pryor and Cleavon Little because Richard Pryor actually helped write the movie. And Richard Pryor was actually set to play Bart. And then Cleavon Little actually came on and said, no, you know what? Go ahead and use it. Because it's a period movie. You know, you can't act like it didn't happen. Like you see some of these, these docudramas from like The Butler, or there was another one, Jackie Robinson. You see a lot of these, and you can't just act like they never said that. I'm trying not to say it on air right now. It's like really a touchy subject. But that was a huge controversy with this movie. So if it were to be made today, it could not be made today, especially with a white Jewish man from New York making this movie. There is no way that would have been okay. But if Brooks were to make it today, then they would have completely gone away from that word. They would have done something else, but it was 1970, 73, 74, so they didn't care. But he also said, if you get rid of it, I have a movie. But he received a lot of letters about the references, and he said, but of course most of them were from white people. And the film was actually almost not even released at all. They screened it for the executives, and there were a few laughs. The head of distribution said, you know what, let's just dump it and take a loss. But the president, John Calley, insisted that they open it in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago as a test. And it became the studio's top moneymaker that summer, which the movie premiered, so it was 1974, on February 7th, 1974, at the Pickwick Drive-In Theater in Burbank. 250 invited guests, including Cleavon Little and Gene Wilder, rode horses to the event and watched the film on horseback. That doesn't sound very comfortable to me. I don't know about you. I have only ridden a horse once in my life, and it wasn't really even that far. But just thinking of it now, I couldn't. There's no way. But during that set, while they're on the film, Gene Wilder had been talking to Mel Brooks and actually had told him, he was like, hey, You know what'd be really funny is, what if we like saw what happened to Victor Frankenstein later in the year? And he's like, what if you like, I'm trying to remember. Did I not write it down? Jesus. All right. Well, I thought I wrote it down. It's been a minute. So Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks, they came up with the idea. And they had talked about how it'd be kind of cool if they went back and talked about Victor Frankenstein and, what if he had like some relatives or something. So they did that. Well, what they wanted to do was they wanted to shoot the whole film in black and white. But Universal was like, well, we'll shoot it in color and then we'll just transfer it over to black and white. And Mel Brooks was like, no. He goes, it has to be in black and white. And Universal's like, well, I mean, we're going to do it in black and white, but we want to do it in color, and we're probably going to, like, send the color ones out to the theater. And Mel Brooks is like, no, we're doing it in black and white. Like, if you don't want to do that, then I'll just take it to another studio because this is just ridiculous. It's not that hard. I just want black and white. I don't want any color. I don't want you guys to tell me that you're going to do black and white film, and then I go to the theaters and they're in color. I'm just not going to do that. So they later on were like, yeah, okay, all right, we'll do that. So what the movie is about is a young neurosurgeon, which it was Victor Frankenstein, von Frankenstein, however you want to say it. He's a neurosurgeon. He's teaching a class. This guy comes and tells him that his grandfather left Frederick Frankenstein. That's what it is. So what he does is he's teaching a class, and one of the students is like, isn't your grandfather Dr. Frankenstein? And he's like, it's Frankenstein. And yes, he is. And the student's like, oh, aren't you like interested in what he did? And he's like, no, because my grandfather was insane. So this guy, he comes in, older guy, sits down and he tells him, your grandfather left you all this money. He wants you to live at the castle. This is this. So they go on to Transylvania, where Frederick starts to leave. So he gets to the castle and he arrives, and there's Igor, who his grandfather worked for Frederick's grandfather. But when he gets there, Igor says, Frankenstein. And Gene Wilder, Frederick, goes, it's Frankenstein. And he goes, you're putting me on. He's like, no, it's Frankenstein. And he's like, well, do you also say Frederick? He's like, no, it's Frederick. He's like, all right. And then he goes, you must be Igor. He goes, no, it's Igor. He's like, well, they told me he was Igor. And he goes, well, they were wrong, weren't they? And this one I hadn't seen until, when did I see that? Maybe 2 years ago. And I'd seen Blazing Saddles at least 8 years before that. And I hadn't seen it until my best friend Carl was actually telling me about it. That's one of his all-time favorite movies. And so I was like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about with this movie, Carl. Like, I've done the research on it for a paper before, but I never really saw it. And he was like, how have you not seen it? That's like Mel Brooks' best film. And I was like, simple as this, Carl. I haven't seen the movie. So I was at my favorite record store back home, Zia, and they have every single movie I could ever want. And if they don't, it's a huge shocker. They had a ton of Young Frankenstein. So I was like, you know what? $5. It's not going to kill me. It's a Mel Brooks film, and it's got Gene Wilder. It can't be that bad. So I get it, and I told him, I was like, I just got Young Frankenstein for the first time. I might watch it. And he goes, no, you legit need to watch it. This is when he and I were actually keeping up our Snapchat streak, which we have both lost. And it's been like a year. I hardly even talk to him. I should do that again. Anyway. So we used to Snapchat all the time, and I would Snapchat him when I was watching movies. Well, when I told him I got Young Frankenstein, he goes, if you send me one single snap in the next 2 hours, I will not open it. I will not respond to you. You have to sit there and watch this film. So I absolutely love it. This is probably my all-time favorite Mel Brooks movie. Like, it's if you haven't seen Young Frankenstein, you're missing out, man. Because this is pure gold. Absolute gold. And there's Jimmy Neutron actually later on was quoting the film. Unbeknownst to us children who were watching the show, until later on, if you've seen Young Frankenstein and you watch it, then you're just like, oh my God, this was great. I'd have to go back. If you have Hulu, it's on there. You could probably look it up, which episode it is. Yeah. Anyway, going back to what the movie was about. So he gets there, and then there's an assistant, and there's this lady who used to work with Victor Frankenstein. And her name is Frau Blucher, which in German is glue. And so every single time they say her name, Frau Blucher, the horse is whinny outside. So that's just an ongoing joke. So when he gets there and he's trying to figure out, he's getting a tour of the castle, and he asks, well, where's my grandfather's private library? And they're like, well, we don't know what you're talking about. This is the only library here. So he's sitting in his room, and he hears a violin playing. Well, then he starts going to the violin, and he finds his grandfather's private library. So he's going through all the books, and he's like, oh my God, this is pure gold. This is amazing. I absolutely love this. And he's like going insane while he's driving his assistant Igor to sleep. Another thing too is that's just an all-around good quoting movie. Like, it's so hard for me not to quote that movie on a daily basis, because I'll quote it with Carl all day long. Like, our code name for whenever we go hang out, he lives in Iowa, so it's hard for me to hang out with him. But the one time I did hang out with him, was our code word was werewolf, wolf. You gotta watch the movie. I'm telling you, you're gonna love this movie. Like, you legit need to watch Young Frankenstein. It's on Stars. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's still on Stars. It might still be on Netflix. I would definitely check there. If not, I'm sure you can find it somewhere. But it's an all-around great movie. So what was interesting about this is that they actually had props from the original Frankenstein movie. So they had, and Ken Strickfaden, if I'm saying his name right, he made the machines for the lab sequences in Universal's Frankenstein films. So he was actually still around during that. And Brooks was like, hey, do you have any of the equipment and all that? And Ken was like, are you kidding me? Yeah, I got all the equipment. And he brought him out to his garage, and he had almost everything. So he rented the equipment from him, and he actually gave Ken the screen credit he deserves. So you'll actually see it, because he actually, back on the Universal Frankenstein film, he didn't get the credit for it. So Brooks was like, well, here's this. I'll give you some money for this equipment, and then I'll also make sure that you get credit for giving us the equipment, because you definitely deserve that. And Ken was like, yeah, sounds like a fair deal to me. So he gets that. I'm sorry, it wasn't with Universal. It was Columbia that the film studio was. Either way, they're all the same to me. He took it over to 20th Century Fox when they were having that whole debate. They're having the whole argument on if it was going to be in black and white or if it was going to be in color. So 20th Century Fox was like, you know what? We'll do it. And so they tried to trick him to shoot it in color, like I was saying. Yeah. So they were going to make it in black and white and put it on a color stock so they could show it in Peru. And he's like, no, because you'll screw me. You'll say this, and in order to save the company, you'll risk a lawsuit, and you'll print everything in color. It's got to be on black and white, thick film. They had a lot of fun filming this movie. Like, they actually added on more scenes just so they could keep filming. Because it's honestly, you watch it, and it's just an all-around great film. They have one of the most notable scenes, which is the Putting on the Ritz scene, where Gene Wilder and Frankenstein, who it took me a while to know, but Frankenstein was played by the man who was Frank Barone and Everybody Loves Raymond, and he was the what was his name? He was in Scooby-Doo too. What was his name? He was making a theme park or something like that. But if you see Scooby-Doo 2, I think it's on Netflix. You can watch it on there. You know what I'm talking about. But if you have seen Everybody Loves Raymond, you know what I'm talking about. And you look at it, and you're looking at him for a while. And you're just like, I know this face. Why do I know it? That is why. Because he is Frank Barone. But that's the big one, is that Frankenstein and Gene Wilder are dancing to Putting on the Ritz. And it's one of my all-time favorites. Like, I tell Carl every single time that we have to do that skit because it's just beautiful. And it's so funny and so stupid. But that's how Mel Brooks films are, is they're so funny and they're so stupid. They actually revised that song a little bit because it was a little racially insensitive. So he took it a notch back from going to Blazing Saddles to this. He's like, let's dial it down a notch here. So after that, we got one of the best ones. Oh wow, I'm at 26 minutes. I'm not gonna talk a whole lot about Spaceballs. I'll probably get done with that pretty quick. If I go over, I go over. I really don't even care. I'm talking. You guys are listening. I'm really surprised if you actually are listening because I talk a lot, and I'm surprised I'm still going. I'm actually going a little farther than I thought I was. You know what? No, because we had that little miss up where I wasn't recording right. So that tacked on a minute of me just messing around. Anyway, we got so 1977, Star Wars came out. And then in 1980, we got the second Star Wars movie. So what Mel Brooks did was, he was like, you know what? Let's make a spoof Star Wars movie, because this is a whole line that we could do. They had Star Trek to spoof, but Star Trek was already spoofing itself. You know, you watch Star Trek, and every single time they find an odd creature, it's just a dog with a wig glued onto it. So, and then they find this place, and there's people on it. Anyway, I'm not going to go into Star Trek, because I'm not that big of a Star Trek fan, so I don't want to be talking about things I don't know. But Spaceballs is a spoof of Star Wars. And it's about King Roland of the planet Droidia trying to marry his daughter, Princess Vespa, to Prince Valium. But Vespa is kidnapped by the evil race of the Spaceballs. This one had a couple of good actors. John Candy is one of the main ones as Barf, who is Chewie. And John Candy is such a lovable character, and literally every single movie he has been in, he's always been like the favorable character. And then you had Rick Moranis, who was supposed to be Darth Vader, but he was the helmet. Oh, what's the name? Did I write it down or did I not? I did not, because I'm a shem. That's why. Dark Helmet? That might be it. I don't remember. Anyway. But it's Star Wars, just in a spoof version. And you have who's supposed to be Han Solo is Lone Star. They also have who is Jabba the Hutt is Pizza the Hutt. So I can't say Pizza Hut without saying Pizza the Hutt. Like, it's etched into my brain. I watched it when I was probably, oh man, my mom showed me it. I was like 13 or 14, somewhere around there. Yeah, that sounds about right. But now, like, for 7 years, I've been saying Pizza the Hut, and I can't stop. Like, I just can't. So thanks, Mom. Appreciate that. But if it weren't for her and my dad, I wouldn't be into these kind of movies and a lot of the things that I'm into. So I actually am very appreciative of that, because they're like my favorite things in the world. Especially when I'm down, you know, they're like one of the best things to watch. So, the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars actually makes a cameo in the movie. They have, it's the exterior shot of the space diner, and it's actually spotted parked out there with the other space vehicles. And what they did was before they did the movie, Mel Brooks got the script and he gave it to George Lucas, and he was like, "Hey, if there's anything in here you want us to change, feel free and let me know." And so George Lucas was like, "All right, cool." So he read the script before the production even began, and he actually loved it. And he said, "You know what? Here's what I'll do. I'll give you my special effects, my crew, and you know what? You can just do it from there." He's like, "I'll help you out with this, actually." And his special effects company was Industrial Light and Magic. So it was actually really cool because George Lucas is usually like super okay with spoof films. Like when Family Guy did it, they did the Family Guy version, which if you've never seen Star Wars, but you've seen the Family Guy episodes, that's Star Wars. Like straight up, you have technically seen Star Wars. That's it. So when they did it, they were going to do the second version. They were going to do the second part, but they're like, "Hold on, let's contact Lucasfilms and ask them if this is okay to do." So they contact him, and he was like, "Yeah, I actually really like it when you guys do the episodes. I think those are actually really cool." So they're like, "All right, cool." So they did another one. So George Lucas is usually okay with it just as long as you don't sell any merchandise. He's like, "When you start selling merchandise, then I'm going to have to do something about it." He's like, "Other than that, I legit don't care." So Mel Brooks had said in a 2013 television interview that he obtained George Lucas's full permission to parody any and all Star Wars related. Like I said, they couldn't do any merchandise to be produced. So, they copied a lot of things, like the escape pod launch sequence is an unused clip from Star Wars episode... Ooh, you're really testing my Roman numerals here. 4? No. 6. A New Hope. No. That can't be right. No, it is right. It's 4. I am in college, and I do not know Roman numerals, so... But then again, it's 2018. So why would I need to use Roman numerals when I can use actual numerals? Anyway, A New Hope, 1977. They used an unused clip. Lucasfilm gave it to him. He also came up for the idea when he discovered he didn't spoof space movies. So he was like, "You know what? Let's go ahead and take care of Star Wars." He already spoofed the Western, Blazing Saddles, and the horror genre, Young Frankenstein. He did another one, silent movie, which was a spoof of, you guessed it, silent movies. So when they came up for a title for the film, they were actually going to have it called Planet Moron. But then they heard of the British science fiction proof Morons from Outer Space, 1985. So they went through all the letters of the alphabet to search for a word to add to space, which Thomas Meehan actually suggested. So Mel Brooks spilled the drink and shouted, "Balls." I'm sorry if I'm not allowed to say it. You know what? It's 9:30 at night. I'm just going to say it. Anyway, so that's when Ronnie Graham was like, "You know what? Spaceballs. There it is. Let's do that." What? Okay, so when they came up with the title, I cannot read my handwriting, and it's on the Google Doc. I don't even know how I'm doing this. This is ridiculous. I'm getting old. I can't read. So when they came up with the name, they also decided that for the villains, the Spaceballs, they would wear ball-shaped helmets. And it was actually one of the most expensive movies he'd actually made at $25 million, with Dracula Dead and Loving It from 1995, a close second at $22 million. Never saw that one. Never even heard of it until I just saw it now. Oh yeah, the producers. That's another big one of his. It was the producers was less than $1 million to produce. I am at 35 minutes. Oh my God. I am sorry, Quentin Tarantino. But then again, I didn't have a whole lot to talk about Tarantino, so I don't feel as bad. But once the film was done, George Lucas actually loved the film so much and wrote him a letter after the premiere saying he thought it was going to he was going to bust something from laughing so hard. Lucas told Brooks that had he not chosen to parody Star Wars, Spaceballs would have succeeded as a great adventure film. So Mel Brooks was actually very flattered by Lucas's compliments and support. And the script, I don't know why I'm saying it till just now. It took Mel Brooks 6 months to write the script. Another big one that some of you may have not known that Mel Brooks did was Robin Hood Men in Tights. And that is a very great one. Very great. It's not right in English, but I really don't care because I will do what I want. So yeah, Robin Hood Men in Tights is another good one. I think that one's still on Netflix too. I would definitely watch that one. It's really good. That one has Dave Chappelle in it as a Chew. Gesundheit. So, on to one of my all-time favorites, Quentin Tarantino. He gets 23 minutes, which is fine. So, I'm going to start off with his first and most low-budget film, which was Reservoir Dogs. And that one is my all-time favorite Quentin Tarantino movie. I had never seen it until after I graduated high school, when my cousin Daphne, Bobby, and their son, my cousin Thatcher, gave me the book. It's a script book. And she was like, this is one of Tarantino's best films. This has helped a lot of people with writing scripts. And it honestly has, because whenever I'm writing scripts and I'm stuck on what I need to do with certain things, I look at that book the most, because that is my all-time favorite. Like I sat there and watched it for the first time in the summer of 2016. And I was just like, I want to keep watching this. Like, I don't care if I watch this 100 times today. I have to keep watching this film because it's golden. It was, so the movie is about, it's hodgepodge, just like every single Tarantino movie is, almost told out of, oh my God, I'm sorry. Almost told out of sequence every single time. This one, not so much, because it's more flashbacks than anything. But the film is these guys go on a jewel heist, but one of them is an undercover cop, which I'm just going to blow it for you guys, because if you haven't seen Reservoir Dogs by now, I don't feel sorry ruining it for you. Mr. Orange, played by Tim Roth, is the undercover cop. And so when the police show up during their jewel heist, Mr. Blonde starts going guns blazing and is just laying it out on cops. Well, they're all running, trying to figure out, where they're going to go. So they get out and... Am I missing a page? No, I am not. So this is a good thing. I have a lot to talk about Reservoir Dogs, but very little about Pulp Fiction. So Mr. Orange is shot after trying to take a car. He and Mr. White go into a warehouse where Mr. Orange is bleeding out, and they're waiting on a whole bunch of other guys they're waiting on the other guys to come in so that, they can carry on with what they're doing. They're trying to figure out where they're going to go. They're parking the cars in different spots. Well, they have no idea who's dead and who's alive. And so they're trying to get a hold of them, but it's kind of hard to, because it's 1992. There's not, they don't have like high quality cell phones like we do. So it's kind of difficult for them to figure out who was alive and who was dead. So Mr. Pink shows up, played by Steve Buscemi. I don't really know. I'm just going to say Steve. So Mr. Pink comes in and he's like, oh my God, Orange was tagged. And so they're trying to figure it out. Mr. Pink and Mr. White are going at it. Mr. White is played by Harvey Keitel, who is an amazing film actor, he used to do a lot of films with Scorsese. And then Scorsese got De Niro. And so then Keitel was like, all right, I'm going to go with Tarantino. So you'll see Harvey Keitel in a lot of like almost every single Tarantino film. So then we get Mr. Blonde comes in, played by Michael Madsen. And Mr. Blonde is like one of my all-time favorite characters. Like, he is insane, but I love him because he's psychotic, but he's funny. And so that's why whenever you guys hear me refer to somebody, Mr. Blonde, that's my buddy Lou, who actually lives out somewhere in this confusing state. He's psychotic and he's funny, just like the character. He's just not as psychotic. He's just strange. He's a strange one, as I say. If he's listening, I really hope he is and he hears me saying this. So, Mr. Blonde is insane. His real name is Vic Vega. And I'll get to that, why that's important later on when I talk about Pulp Fiction. And then we have Quentin Tarantino, who plays Mr. Brown. And he doesn't have a whole lot of dialogue, who is also played by, I think I said that. Did I just say that Quentin Tarantino played him? I don't know. I'm losing my mind. And then you have Chris Penn, who played Nice Guy Eddie. And Chris Penn is Sean Penn's brother. And I don't remember what his name was, but he played Joe. He wasn't that important, apparently. And then they had an actual guy in there who was Mr. Blue, who only had like one whole line in the entire show. Well, no, he had like one or two lines, and that's it. And he was killed. Like, we don't even know what happened to him in the movie. I'm pretty sure, I think they said he got killed. Mr. Brown's gone. Nice Guy Eddie reminds me of a guy that I used to work with at the dealership. I swear they were the same person. They talked and acted the exact same way. Like, it's insane. So after Mr. Blonde gets there, then Nice Guy Eddie gets there. And so Nice Guy Eddie, Mr. Pink, and Mr. White go out to move cars. And Mr. Blonde and Mr. Orange are left there. But here's the thing. Oh, wait, no, Nice Guy Eddie doesn't get there yet. It's Mr. Pink and Mr. White that go someplace. I've seen this movie a million times. You'd think I would know where they go. But they leave. Mr. Blonde is in. And they leave Mr. Blonde and Mr. Orange together. And what Mr. Blonde did was he got a cop. He took him hostage so he could get out. And so he's in there and he's torturing the cop to none other than Stealers Wheel, Stuck in the Middle with You. So every single time I hear that song, even when I'm watching the scene, I know it's so terrible, but I can't help but laugh at it because it's just the way that he's dancing during the scene. So he tries to kill the cop. Mr. Orange kills Mr. Blonde. Nice Guy Eddie, Mr. White, and Mr. Pink come back. And Nice Guy Eddie's like, why'd you kill him? And he's like, well, he's going to kill the cop. And Nice Guy Eddie's like, oh, this cop? And then shoots the cop. And the cop's gone. So then Joe comes in. And they're all trying to figure it out. And then Joe goes, well, Mr. Orange is the rat. He's the one who got the cops called on us. He's the reason why these two people are dead now. And so now Mr. Blonde is and everything. This. And Mr. White's like, you don't know what you're talking about, Joe. Mr. Orange isn't it. And he's like, no, straight up, Mr. Orange is the rat. And Mr. Orange is like, I don't know what you're talking about. And Mr. White is like, look, this kid is good. He's not an undercover cop. So then Nice Guy Eddie has his gun pointed at Mr. Orange. Mr. White pulls his gun out and points it at Nice Guy Eddie. And then Joe pulls out his gun and points it at Mr. White. Meanwhile, Mr. Pink is like hiding because he's like, I'm not having any of this. Like, I'm not doing it. I'm here for the jewels and that's it. So he's hiding. Oh no, Mr. White is pointing the gun at Joe. Joe's pointing it at him. And the Nice Guy Eddie is pointing it at Mr. Orange. So I'm trying to figure out who had their gun. I know Mr. White definitely had his gun pointed at Joe because Nice Guy Eddie says, stop shooting. He says, stop pointing the gun at my dad. And then bam, 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 they all go down, and Mr. Orange gets shot again. So Mr. White goes up to Mr. Orange, and he's holding him. And Mr. Orange is like, yeah, I was the cop. They're going to be here any second. And Mr. White is like, bro, are you for real right now? Like, you got me shot because you were an actual undercover cop, and now I'm about to go to jail. So guess what's going to happen now? Cops come in. Mr. White has Mr. Orange in his arms. He's got the gun pointed to him. And the cops are shooting at him. Put the gun down, put the gun down. And then, so Mr. Pink gets out after, like, the gun show. Mr. Pink goes out, and then you hear the cops come in. And then Mr. Pink is no more. And then the cops come in, and they're like, put the gun down. And Mr. White's like, no, and shoots him. And then they shoot Mr. White. But before we see them shoot Mr. White, it fades to black, just like The Sopranos. Tarantino's films usually had really, really good soundtracks. So now on to a little trivia for you guys for the film. 14 minutes. I got time. Anyway, I'm going to be here for 2 hours. You guys got time, I got time. So, with Reservoir Dogs, the budget was so low that it couldn't afford police assistance for traffic control. So when Buscemi Steve carjacks a woman, he had to do it when the lights were green. And they actually used a real paramedic during Mr. Orange's scenes to make sure that the amount of blood loss was consistent and realistic to that of a real gunshot. Mr. Orange gets shot, I believe, in the stomach. But you'll, like, see that, like, it's like the opening. That's the second opening image next to the diner scene is he's in the back of the car and he's bleeding. And so it's like one of the biggest memes, because Mr. Orange is in the back. He's like, I'm okay, Larry. And it's like when everything's crashing down on you and somebody asks how you are, and he's just like in the back seat all bloody. And you're like, I'm okay. It's like me on a 24/7 basis. So Michael Madsen, who played Mr. Bronze. Wow. It is only 10 o'clock and I'm already slurring and I haven't had anything to drink. Anyway. So Michael Madsen, who played Mr. Blonde, has a strong aversion to violence. So the torture scene that he did to the cop was extremely difficult for him. Kirk Baltz, who played the kidnapped cop, actually ad-libbed his character had a child. And so Madsen actually just became a father at that time. So that was even harder for him to continue doing the scene. So in some versions, when he actually says that, Mr. Blonde, Michael Madsen, he was just like, I couldn't do it because it left me disturbed trying to leave a child fatherless. So they said in some versions that when he says, oh, please, man, don't do this, I got a kid, you can hear someone, and they say that it's more than likely Tarantino saying, oh, no. And you hear him off screen doing that. And I want to hear that. The other thing, too, is with Kirk Baltz. He wanted to get a real feeling of him being kidnapped. So he was like, put me in the trunk of a car and just drive me around. So Madsen was like, okay. And he did that. He took him through these back alleyways where it was just potholes everywhere. So he's rocking around in the back of that trunk. And then he actually goes into a Taco Bell drive-in with Kirk still in the trunk. So when you see him, when he gets there to the warehouse, he's got the Taco Bell drink. That's because he actually went to Taco Bell before the scene. Tim Roth, like I stated, who played Mr. Orange, was actually in the pool of fake blood for so long that it dried out, and he had to actually be peeled off the floor, and it took so long for them. I think they said it took him like 5 minutes to get him off the floor. And then the apartment that Mr. Orange was in was actually right above the warehouse where they have just about the entire movie take place. It was filmed in 35 days. I can't believe that. I still look at that and I can't. The thing, too, was that it was such a low-budget film that they couldn't afford to... Is that tomato? Yes. Sorry, I got a sandwich and there's tomato on it. So they couldn't really afford a whole lot of costumes. So they wore their own clothes. So every single guy wore their own tuxedo. the title came from a patron at the video archives that Tarantino had actually worked at. He recommended Au revoir les enfants and Au revoir. This is why I don't speak French. Au revoir les enfants. And au revoir. I can't say it. Even if I think about it, I'm not even reading it, and I still, au revoir les enfants. And the patron that he was recommending the film to said, I don't want to see no Reservoir Dogs. I can't. I don't want to see no Reservoir Dogs. That's not surprising that Tarantino came up with that. That's why he did that. And I actually 100% believe that story, because that just sounds like some stupid people kind of thing. Anyway. So Tarantino, it was with most of his films were with Miramax, which, as many of you know, was where Harvey Weinstein was in charge. So Tarantino actually fought Weinstein to keep the torture scene in the film. And Weinstein thought it would have a negative effect on audience. He thought that a torture scene would have more of a negative effect than what he was doing than what he was actually doing to people. Here's the thing, Weinstein, that was Hollywood magic. What you're doing is real life. But you're not there anymore. So sucks to suck. Anyway, Weinstein relented, and the scene was actually included. The movie was actually a larger hit in England, but not so much in the States, because there was little to no promotion for this movie in the United States. So they didn't really get a whole lot of, I didn't know this movie was out. The entire soundtrack budget was spent on securing Stuck in the Middle with You, which, I mean, come on, that was like the perfect song for that. I can't remember what song it was they said that they were going to do instead, but Tarantino was like, no, we have to do this. This film was voted the second best directional debut, right behind Citizen Kane. That's how good this movie is. Like, I would watch it on TV with my parents when they're in the room, and they just kind of look at me and they're like, what the hell are you watching? And I'm like, it's Reservoir Dogs. It's Tarantino. Come on. So now we're going to Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction is another great one. I don't think it's on Netflix anymore. I do have it on Vudu, but that's because I bought the DVD, so I got the digital copy. But I love that movie. That's another good one that I love. I quote that one on a daily basis, too. Many of the quotes I would love to say, but I cannot, because I am on the radio. So, the Pulp Fiction is, I don't know how to describe it. It's got John Travolta, Bruce Willis, Samuel L. Jackson, what's her name? Uma Thurman. And Christopher Walken is actually in it as well. Kind of a weird setting when he comes out, because you're not really expecting it. But these two guys, Vincent Vega, and when I told you guys earlier about the little key element to Vic Vega in Reservoir Dogs, they're actually brothers tied in. And I think they said that Pulp Fiction takes place first, and then it's Reservoir Dogs. Because Harvey Keitel is also... Oh, yeah, that's another one. Harvey Keitel is also in Pulp Fiction. Tarantino is also in it because it's Tarantino. I think he's in every single movie he did. I know for a fact he was in that roller coaster of a movie he did with Robert Rodriguez, From Dusk Till Dawn. That, my friends, I am telling you, is insane. It starts out and you're just like, man, this is a really good film. It's got Tarantino, George Clooney, Harvey Keitel, and it even has Salma Hayek in it, and Danny Trejo, which of course it's going to have Danny Trejo in it because it's also partially a Robert Rodriguez film, and Robert Rodriguez is really big on Danny Trejo. I think Cheech Marin was also in it too. There were a couple of pretty good names in it. But From Dusk Till Dawn, I'm telling you, man. You watch it, and then all of a sudden, I'm just gonna tell you guys because I don't know if I want you to actually watch this film. So it's about these two guys, these two brothers, who go around robbing, and they're on their way to Mexico to get like this huge sum of money. So when they they hijack this pastor and his two kids while they're on an RV to go to Mexico. They go to this bar from dusk till dawn. Well, when they're there, it turns out that this bar is this Aztecian vampire, whatever the hell it is, where they eat the people that are there. They eat the truckers that are there. And it's such an insane movie, I'm telling you. So that happens, and you're just, oh man. You're just like, I don't know what to do with this information right now. Like, you have thrown a lot at me right now, Tarantino and Rodriguez. I do not know what to do with this. Pulp Fiction is two guys who are hitmen. They later go on. Marcellus Wallace is kind of in charge of them. Yeah, he is, because his wife is Mia Wallace, played by Uma Thurman, which Vincent takes out to Jackrabbit Slims, which they actually tried to make that. Some guy tried to make an actual Jackrabbit Slims, which is based off of all 50s. Like, the cars are actual 1950s cars, and all the waiters and waitresses are dressed up as 50s actresses, actors, and singers. They're a hitman, and then something happens where they're out to get Bruce Willis's character Butch, and before that, because the movie is told in an uneven order, so you don't really know what's going on until you've watched it a couple of times and you realize, all right, that's what it is. So, and then I'm trying to remember. They have a suitcase. Oh, that's what it is. They're trying to get this suitcase to somebody. They take it from Marcellus Wallace. I don't remember who they're trying to give it to. And in the film, Tim Roth is also in that film. He's a bank robber. Not a bank robber. Yeah, they're a bank robber. He and his wife. And so they try to rob this diner. And that's the opening and the closing scene. No, it's not the closing scene. The closing scene is Vincent Vega getting shot. Sorry to disappoint you people, but I had to. It's all right to disappoint a lot of people. Anyway, they rob this diner because nobody robs diners. Then Vincent, I don't know when it is. He goes to, this is probably the only scene that was actually correct. Vincent is there at Butch's old apartment to kill him, but he leaves his gun on the counter like an idiot and goes into the bathroom. So Butch comes out, gets his gun, and kills him. But anyway, Pulp Fiction. Little trivia about that. When Vince Vega is giving Mia the adrenaline shot, which that's another big thing, is that he is heroin. He injects heroin. So he has some in his pocket, but Mia doesn't know, and she thinks it's cocaine, and so she snorts it, which is another thing of why you should not take things that you don't know what they are, because it could kill you. And this was a prime example. So he goes to his dealer, and he's like, you need to fix this. And the dealer's like, no. So then he gets there, and Vince is like, you're going to fix it. And he's like, all right, well, I got like an adrenaline shot. So they had to draw a dot right where her heart was to give her the adrenaline shot. But what they did was they actually shot the scene backwards. So when Mia is up, you don't see the dot there. But when she's down there, then you can. So when she shoots up, that was the first scene. And then she goes back. And didn't mean to hit that. That was when it was filmed in reverse. And it's kind of a hard scene to watch because it's just like any needle like going into in the skin just like freaks me out, which is why I could never be a doctor. I couldn't be a vet tech. I couldn't do any of that kind of stuff because I hate needles so much. I legit hate those kind of needles. Like, tattoo needles are completely different, so I don't have a problem with it. But these ones, I don't know what it is, but it's a pinching feeling the entire time, and I don't like it. Meanwhile, a tattoo one is just like, I'm just getting poked. So the other thing, too, is that when the diner is getting held up, they have everybody, all the diner patrons, put their wallets in a bag. And then Samuel L. Jackson's like, no, you're not taking my wallet. And he gets his wallet back. He's like, I'm going to need my wallet back. So his character, Samuel L. Jackson, is Jules. And they ask him, they were like, hey, he's like, this is my wallet. And it says bad mother effer on it. And that wallet was actually Quentin Tarantino's wallet, which I think is amazing. Another thing I didn't know, two things, was with two different characters. James Gandolfini was actually considered for the role of Vincent Vega. And I think that would have been, honestly, a really, really good role for him. It worked really well for Travolta. He's kind of hit and miss with a lot of his roles. He's just an okay actor, honestly. I wouldn't say he's one of my favorites. He's all right. But I think James Gandolfini as Vincent Vega would have been pretty good. And then you have Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who played Elaine Bennis in, Seinfeld, one of the greatest comedies ever. She actually turned down the role for Mia Wallace. And looking at it, if she had taken that role, I don't think I could see it the same way. I think Uma Thurman was perfect for that role. When I was researching Pulp Fiction, there was a lot, but it was extremely long content, and I'm just like, I can't. That's a lot to write down. I'm not going to do that. I'll just go with plain and simple. Pulp Fiction, I love the movie. I really do. But it's not my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie. My favorite one is all time is Reservoir Dogs, because you can't go wrong with it. So, now that I've been talking I'm actually really surprised, because even with that little mess-up that I had, I actually went on for a good hour. So what we're going to do, I would love to play some music for you guys, but because I have the type of iPhone that doesn't have the audio output jack, and the adapter that I have for it continuously skips, which is why I have to wear Bluetooth headphones for my iPhone. And my iPod doesn't work because I can't remember the passcodes, so I'm just going to restart it and sell it. But I would love to play music for you guys, but unfortunately I cannot. So I'm just going to let you guys listen to the radio shows given, songs on here. I'm going to be back in about probably like 5-10 minutes, depends on how fast I can eat this sandwich. And we will take off with Back to the Future, one of the greatest trilogies of all time. So I will see you guys momentarily. Take it easy. Back on air. It was a good break. I dropped my sandwich just in case anybody cares. I'm a little disappointed with it, but I still ate it because I'm hungry. Anyway, I'm only going to talk about Back to the Future Part 1 and 2 because Back to the Future, I liked it, the Part 3, but it's not that I didn't have time to look up trivia about Part 3. It's mostly part of that, but I just didn't really care about it. It's a Western one. I like the Western ones, but I don't really care about this one too much. So we're just not going to talk about that one. I'll talk about what it's about. I just won't give you guys any trivia on it. Back to the Future. Everybody has seen Back to the Future, so I don't need to explain it. And if I do, I will find you, and I will make you watch this beautiful trilogy. So, little thing too is, for those who don't know, there were actually a lot of really big names in this movie, like Thomas F. Wilson. You may not think you know him, but if you have ever watched SpongeBob, and I have to bring this up because our beloved Steven Hillenburg passed away on Monday, who gave us this great series, had Thomas F. Wilson as the voice of many characters on the show. Most notably, he was the Tattletale Strangler, and he was Reg. So I can't listen to those characters without thinking about Biff Tannen. You also had Billy Zane, who played Match, and so if you look at Biff's gang in the background, you can see him. Another Another kind of semi-big one is Casey Shizmazgo, however you pronounce his crazy name. He was Charlie in Young Guns, if you've ever seen that movie. Another great movie. It's a Western based on Billy the Kids and the Regulators. So I highly recommend. That one's got some really big names. It's got Emilio Estevez, Charlie Sheen, Terrence Stamp, Dermot Mulroney, who's actually been in a lot of things. He was in Friends a couple episodes. He was in that Julia Roberts movie, whatever it was. I didn't really care. It's also got Lou Diamond Phillips. It's got a lot of really good people in the movie. And then you have... Casey Shizmazgo, who played Charlie in Young Guns, was 3D. Was he 3D? Yes, he was. He was 3D. He was also... Casey was also in... what's it called? Stand By Me. And I swear he is Vern's older brother, but it said it was a different actor. But I think they're lying to me because I know what Casey looks like. And I know for a fact that is Casey. So, Crispin Glover, very, very strange man. I mean, very strange. He is George McFly. Leah Thompson is Lorraine. Don't really care about the other two siblings because they're not important to me. Then you have Christopher Lloyd as Doc Emmett Brown. And the most notable, Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly. And it was originally Eric Stoltz who played Marty McFly. And I looked him up because the name sounds familiar. Well, I guess he's in Madam Secretary. I forget what his name was. It wasn't really that important to me because I don't watch Madam Secretary. My parents do, which is weird because I'm the one that got him into the show because I showed my mom and then my mom was watching it and my dad started watching it. But I haven't watched it since the first episode. And I only watched it because Eric Bergen, who was in Jersey Boys, was in it. And I just haven't watched it since. But getting back to the Future, as I've gone on like 4 different movies. So, part 1, I'm going to talk about. That one's a really good one. I didn't see part 1 first when I watched the series. The first one that I saw was part 2, and that was... I was 10 years old when I saw that because my brother, my mom, and I were in the living room, and my mom asked us, she's like, have you guys ever seen Back to the Future? And my brother and I were like, I don't even know what that is. So she puts it on, and it became like one of my all-time favorite movies. Like, I watched that show so much that I was legit having dreams about punching Biff. I'm not even lying. I probably had like 3 or 4 dreams of me just like laying out Biff because it's Biff. So that one's always been one of my favorites, especially since they predicted a year early the Cubs winning the World Series. I'm going to talk a little more about Back to the Future Part 2 later on. I got to talk about Part 1 right now because Part 1 is the most important one. The script for Back to the Future was rejected 44 times. That's a lot. I mean, it's insane to me to think that these studios turned down such a classic movie. Like, this is probably one of the greatest movies ever made. Not probably, it is. So when they mention in there, because Ronald Reagan actually was president in the 1980s, he was also an actor. For those who may not know by now, even though we're in college and full-grown adults, they travel back to 1955, and so when Doc is like, oh, well, who's president in 1985? And Marty, so confidently, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan? The actor? Okay, yeah, sure. I'm sure he's president. Right? I mean, think about it. You go back to the 90s, like if it was, it's 2018, you travel back to 1998, and you're talking about it, and they're like, well, who's president? Donald Trump. Donald Trump? Donald Trump's president? Get out of here with that. That's exactly how it was with the Ronald Reagan being president. You're just like, I need you to get out of my face, like, right now with your future stuff. And as Biff so very well put it, make like a tree and get out of here. So, When Reagan saw the film, he was extremely amused by Doc disbelieving that he was actually president, that that an actor could become president. So he actually had the projectionist. I cannot talk. It is 10:30 at night. And I'm probably not going to be going to bed till like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning because I have laundry to fold. Because why? I don't know. I'm just too lazy to fold it because there's just too much. Anyway. Back to that. He had the projectionist stop and replay the scene. And later on, during a State of the Union address, Ronald Reagan actually quoted the film. This was in 1986 that he did this. As they say in Back to the Future, where we're going, we don't need roads. Thomas F. Wilson, who played Biff, improvised the famous line, "Make like a tree and get out of here," and also Butthead. And I say "make like a tree and get out of here" so many times, and I get people staring at me like I'm stupid. Like, I know I am. A little bit inside. I'm a little dumb. I got my moments. But it's like, how are you not getting this quote? This is like the best quote ever. And you have, like I said, Crispin Glover, who played George McFly. He had only seen the film, I think he's only seen it once. It was right after it premiered, and that's the only time he's seen it. And then Christopher Lloyd actually said that, he'll watch it if, he's channel surfing and he sees it on. He's like, oh, you know what? Why not? Let's go ahead and watch this. And what I thought, I swear to God, I thought that Michael J. Fox did the singing in Back to the Future, but he didn't. It was actually Mark Campbell. So that was a little bit of a shock to me today when I found that out, because I don't, it's pretty insane. Michael J. Fox did do the guitar parts. I know that for a fact that he did that. And when he was in high school, he actually used to skateboard, so he knew pretty well how to skateboard on part one. He knew how to skateboard, so he was like, I don't have any problems doing it on here, This 30-something-year-old man who looks like he's 18 can still skateboard like he is 18, and it's insane to me. Like, it wasn't until like to the 2000s that he actually started to age, and you're just like, man, what are you on? Like, give me that. So you had, it was, Back to the Future was the top grossing film of 1985, which is not surprising because today it's still one of the top grossing films. It's like the best film. Screw Citizen Kane. I'm not going to say Reservoir Dogs because I like Reservoir Dogs. But Back to the Future is like one of my top 10 favorite movies. Part 2 mostly. So when Michael J. Fox was at a London Comic-Con, he had said that none of his kids have seen Back to the Future. He's got 4 kids. None of them have seen it. Some of Christopher Lloyd's lines were actually improvised, and I want to know which ones. Like, when you guys say, like, for real, when they say that actors improvise lines, I want to know which ones. Give me the lines that they improvised. They gave me the one that Thomas F. Wilson improvised, but give me the ones that Christopher Lloyd improvised, because I would like that piece of information. I do this a lot. I talk kind of low. Not really. Not all the time. And then you have, so when they were in the car, when Marty was taking Lorraine, which it makes me cringe every single time. When Marty's taking Lorraine to the dance under the Sea Enchantment, he is drinking out of a flask, and she like starts smoking a cigarette. Well, he freaks out. He spits out that water. You see it in the scene. Well, the flask was originally supposed to have water, and it did. So with big studios, they like to take multiple takes of different scenes just to see which one's the best one, and then, you get it from there. So what they did was the crew switched out the flasks, and they put actual alcohol in it. So when Michael J. Fox is drinking it, he realizes it, and he sits. It's a gag reel. I think they said it was on. What's it on? one of the editions. I want to see it. Yeah, he was. Yeah, that's what I got right there. When another thing too is when Thomas F. Wilson is like at Comic Cons or anything like that, he carries around these postcards with frequently asked questions. So when anybody asks him about the franchise, he just hands them the postcard just to save some time. And the original actor who was supposed to play Marty, Eric Stoltz, another odd guy. He's a method actor. So when he was on set, after he wanted to be called Marty. He's one of those where he gets so into it you have to call him by the character. So when they decided not to use him anymore because he was a rough guy. Like in the lunchroom scene when he and Biff are about to go at it, Eric was actually straight up like pushing Thomas Wilson. He's like getting him ready. He's like, come on, man. He's like, come on, fight me. You're not going to do anything. Come on. He's roughing him up. And Thomas even said, he was like, he left bruises and he about broke my collarbone doing that. And Thomas was like, I was going to get him back because when we're in the parking lot and I punch him, I was actually going to punch him in the stomach, but then he left production, so I couldn't do it. So I'm sorry, Thomas F. Wilson, you big old teddy bear, that you couldn't get this man back. That makes me not like Eric Stoltz because you roughed up my Biff Tannen. So when he left production, they told Christopher Lloyd, they were like, hey, Eric's not working here anymore, so we're going to bring in this guy. We're going to bring in Michael J. Fox. And Christopher Lloyd was like, who's Eric? And they told him, they're like, Eric that played Marty McFly, the actor. And he was like, oh, I actually thought his name really was Marty. Oh, yeah, this is for my professor because I saw this and I knew I had to add it in here. My professor's name is McDermott. That's his last name. In an early draft of the franchise, they actually had Marty McFly's last name as Marty McDermott. So I feel like he should know that. But they felt that it had too many syllables. Well, Professor McDermott, I think they should have kept it because then I could refer to you as Marty McDermott. I probably wouldn't. I don't really know. And to the next trivia. So the space alien gag, it actually first appeared in the third draft, and they were originally going to have Marty come in and scare Biff as Darth Vader from Planet Vulcan. They also had James Woods considered for the part of Doc Brown, which would have been another film that James Wood and Michael J. Fox worked on. There was another film, I remember watching it when I was a kid, that they were cops or something like that. It was a good film. I just wish I could remember what it was. Somebody would probably remember. I know I can't. And this film was actually number 1 in the box office for 3 solid months. That's insane to me. For this movie to stay at the top for 3 months. I can't. Because even thinking about that now, that's just insane nowadays because usually movies are in for 2-3 months. I think Incredibles 2 was probably still at number 1 for a good month, I want to say, if that. But to be 3 months, solid, man. I mean, going just straight 3 months, number 1. I can't believe that. But then again, it's Back to the Future, so I can't believe it because it's an amazing film. And then part 2, I'm going to move on to that one. That one is one of my all-time favorites. That's the one where they go to the future. Biff goes into the past, changes it. Then he brings the DeLorean back. They go into the past. They go to the present day. It's completely different. They're trying to figure out what it was. Then they have to go back to the future or back to the past, fix what older Biff did to younger Biff, and change everything. And like I said, it was the first Back to the Future movie I watched, and it was my all-time favorite. And what's insane, too, is with a lot of the things that when they went to 2015 and, they were in present day, whatever the town, Hill Valley, when they're there, it's insane to see that everything that they saw as just regular day stuff 30 years later is now antiques. And that's incredibly true, because you go into an antique store and you find VHS players, you find camcorders, you find all of these different things. And it's just insane to me to think that they actually really predicted that correctly, that, they go 30 years in and everything that they see as normal day stuff is just, oh my God, this is so cool. This is, this is retro vintage stuff that my parents played with. So now I get to do this. So, and at the same time, when they were doing part 2, they knew they were going to do part 3. So they were filming those two together. So obviously Back to the Future was, what am I trying to say? Premiered in 1985. Part 2 was 1989, and part 3 was 1990. With this is what I thought was honestly extremely funny when I read it, is that Biff's alternate, when you go into the present day, when he's the billionaire, that was actually based on Donald Trump. And I think that's hilarious, because looking back at the 2016 elections, they actually, when they have that picture of Donald Trump on, I actually still have it on my phone. Donald Trump is sitting on his private jet eating, and there's the KFC and all that, and somebody photoshopped the Gray Sports Almanac onto his tray in the jet. And so when I saw that, I was like, this is amazing. I don't know if they read that or if they already knew that Donald Trump was essentially Biff Tannen, but this is just incredible, and I absolutely love it. So another thing too is, like I had said before, when I did the Jaws segment, that they just kept making the movies and they wouldn't stop. So even then, back then, they legit thought they were just going to keep going. So they spoofed, they said that in 2015, we're going to have Jaws 19. And it's just this terrible shark. Like the sticker shark that I told you guys about in Jaws 3 was more terrifying than this holographic one. Well, on there it said it was by Max Spielberg. And Max Spielberg is Steven Spielberg's real son. And Max was born in 1985, right around the first one. So after the shark jumps out on the holographic one, Marty says the shark still looks fake, which refers to Steven Spielberg's frustrations and doubts about Bruce the shark. Which they were going to do, they were actually going to do Godzilla for that. But they're like, no, let's do Jaws because that's more realistic. Well, they should have done Godzilla because we actually got a new Godzilla a year prior to that in 2014. So that one actually, if they did that, I think people would be losing their minds, just like they did. So when the Cubs went into the playoffs, it was insane because I remember I was like, oh my God, Back to the Future. We're getting the Cubs 2015 World Series right here is what we're getting. And I hadn't seen the Cubs go into the playoffs, they went into the National League Championships. And so I was like, oh my God, they're going to do it this year. This is insane. And for a fourth generation Cub fan and a huge Back to the Future Part 2 fan, this is just like a huge double whammy. You're just like, oh my God. Now I'm sending myself into a panic attack because I can't believe it. But they didn't. But either way, I didn't really care that they didn't make it that year because then the next year they actually won the World Series in Game 7. Blew a 3-1 lead, Cleveland. Good job. But like my dad said too with the Cubs, I honestly don't even care if they win 100 games next year. I'm just glad that I got to see them win the World Series in my lifetime. And I'm sure that we probably will see another Cubs World Series in the future, especially with Joe Madden as our manager. They did get rid of my Tommy La Stella, so I'm a little disappointed with that. But, they got to do what they got to do. So, but anyway, I went from talking about Back to the Future to the Chicago Cubs. And I don't mind doing that because the Chicago Cubs is my team. They're my baby. Just like Anthony Rizzo. How dare he get engaged? Anyway. The other thing, too, is that, like I was talking about with the antique shop, when he's looking in there, he sees like a camcorder And then they have the Nintendo game, excuse me, the 1987 Nintendo game for Jaws. And ironically enough, during the summer, I was actually at this antique store and found the exact same game. Not the one that was used in the film, but the exact same game for the Nintendo NES. So I think that's actually kind of funny. I found it in an antique store back home when I was in Arizona. To me, like, when I read that, I was like, that's actually kind of funny. Especially with the original box and everything. And that sucker still works, too. That's, like, probably my new favorite game next to Mario. I gotta play that when I go back there in the summer. I should have brought my NES here. I don't know what I was thinking. But Jaws. This is Back to the Future night, not Jaws night. Back to the Future Part 2 was the third highest grossing film of 1989. And in the Cafe 80s, the most infamous Cafe 80s. Infamous, famous, I don't really know. They had the arcade games Wild Gunman and Pac-Man, marked Priceless Artifact, Do Not Touch. And I'm pretty sure that's still pretty relevant today. Because you have a lot of people that, I mean, even kids, like people my age too, still treasure these games because they're classics. So when you have like an original machine, it's hard to beat. But the other thing too is what's a dangerous game with these is that they are extremely expensive to fix because they're so old and they're original. So there's actually a bar in downtown Phoenix back at my place that's the Cobra, and you can go there and you can play these old school arcade games. You can play Frogger, Pac-Man, Astros, you can play all of that and for like 25-50 cents, and it's like the greatest. So that also really kind of scares me though with it being a bar because people leave their drinks there, and it stresses me out when I was there. The one time I was there, seeing people like putting their drinks on the machines, because I'm just like, I need you to please not do that because this is an amazing game. Like Asteroids, no, Space Invaders. Space Invaders is my favorite game to play. Like I might just download it on my phone just so I can play it. So the thing too is that another big character in Back to the Future Part 2 is Elijah Wood as one of the kids who are playing The Last Gunman, and they can't figure out how to play it. And when Marty starts playing it, he's like, you gotta use your hands. It's like a baby's toy, which was actually pretty close to how video games were nowadays. When you had the Nintendo Wii and then you had the Xbox and PlayStation come out with the camera that you could just have a handheld controller that you can play with. You don't have to. But even then, it's just like, I guess more toward, well, no, I was going to say even more towards virtual reality, but you still have to use these controllers when you're doing VR games. Either way, it's insane to look back at that film and then you see it 30 years later, and it's incredibly true. So Back to the Future Part 2, it's one of the best ones. They have my best friend Taylor, who's like my brother, has the transparent hat that Barney McFly Jr. wore in the film. And I really want a pair of self-lacing Nikes. So here's the thing, too, is that I announce myself as McFly on here. And there's a specific reason for that. Because when I used to work at a car dealership, I have these... I don't know what that was. I have these... I don't know if it's like a bird or something. Okay, I have no idea what that is, but I'm like hearing it. Anyway, I have these Converse that my dad got me when we were in Vegas a couple years ago, and they look like the self-lacing Nikes. So I wore them to work, and all the guys started calling me Marty McFly. So I just kind of stuck with it, and that's just been my nickname for 3 years. So I'm about to go out there, and I can't yell. This is ridiculous. It's 11 o'clock at night. What are you guys doing out here? What am I doing out here? I'm doing a radio show. That's what I'm doing out here. I'm slowly killing myself. I'll be all right. Like I said, I don't have anything going on. But yeah. It is a squeaky toy is what it is. If there is not... There better be a dog around here, because if there's not a dog and they just have a squeaky toy, I'm going to be severely depressed. Okay, anyway, so going back to it. I think, honestly, you think about it, it's really hard to find movies that the second part is actually better. Godfather Part 2 is a huge one. That one is a lot better than the first one. That one's my favorite one. And then you have Back to the Future Part 2 that I think is a lot better. And you have The Incredibles 2 that just came out this year that was so much better than the first one. To me, it honestly was. And I think a lot of people agreed on that too, is that if you ask anybody who saw The Incredibles 2, they were like, yeah, it was a lot better than the first one. But we had been waiting 14 years for that movie. But even then, you would think that it wouldn't be that good, because you would think that, like a Disney movie, when they do these kind of things, it's just over and over and over. And you're just like, oh my God, I need you to stop. Like Cars. Are they ever going to stop? Probably not. First one was great. I love the first one. I vaguely remember the second one. Third one, I don't remember anything about. What was the second one about? There is a dog in here. I'm really sorry. I'm like freaking out. I love dogs so much. So, then you have Toy Story, which I love Toy Story. It's one of my all-time favorite Disney movies. I am legit about to cut it close. Like, I'm about to end this radio show just to go play with this dog. I'm not joking, you guys. I'm losing my mind. I had to get my dog fix back at my grandparents' house because I had to, like, love on that dog more because I don't have my own dogs. I missed Leia and Chewie. Hello, Leia and Chewie, if you are listening. I know you guys get excited. Yeah. Back to the Future Part 2, it's like, I don't know. I can't explain it. It's just, it's great. So, if you guys have HBO Go, you can watch it on there. I know it used to be on Netflix and they took it off. But that was like, they had it on there for like a month. And I feel like that was really unfair of you guys to have Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3 only for a month. Like, I know it's expensive, but I mean, come on. Get rid of some of these, like, B movies that nobody cares about and give me more Back to the Future. Like, you guys have Godfather on there, 1, 2, and 3. Take Godfather 3 off and give me my Back to the Future. That's all I want. So, yeah. I actually also got a red puffy vest to go with my self-lacing Converse. And I actually wore that during Back to the Future Day in 2015 when I was a senior in high school. And I don't like saying that because it seems like it was really not that long ago. It was like almost 3. Oh, man, it was 3 years ago. Wow. I tell you what, time flies when you're kind of having a good time. But 30 minutes. I am surprised I am not knocked out right now. Oh, I gotta go for another 30. Which means I will be here until 11:20 because I got a late start. Because I'm not that smart sometimes. I had to go back to my room and get everything. But part 3 was the Western version of the series. I didn't mind it. I liked it. I'll watch it if it's on. It's probably one of the least favorite. Just like Godfather 3, it probably didn't need to happen. But they originally, Christopher Lloyd was like, I would actually have liked to have Doc and Marty go back to ancient Rome. Which that one, oh man, I can't even imagine. I feel like it probably would have been the same quality as the Western one. I liked the Western one. Like I said, I liked it, but it's not my favorite. It's it's got all of the same, that's the thing with the Back to the Future trilogy is that it's the exact same events just happening in different periods of time. So with it wasn't until they actually didn't even call they didn't call Marty a coward or a chicken until the second portion of the series because they didn't call him that at all in the first one. The other thing too with part 2 is you have Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers who made a cameo in that, and he was actually on tour at the time with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he stayed up so that he could go and film his scenes for the movie, and then he flew right back he flew back to go back on tour. So I'm trying to remember. Another thing too is that you have Marty McFly who is dressed as his daughter. Michael J. Fox dressed as his daughter in the film, but that wasn't actually Michael J. Fox talking as his daughter. They had, I forget what her name was, talking. But it's such a weird. You honestly, like some of the stuff that we don't have from Back to the Future, I'm a little mad about. Like the dope Pepsi bottles that they had. Like those things were super cool, and I want that. And then you have like the oven that you put like the little Pizza Hut pouch in, and it's all tiny, and you put it in there for like 5 seconds, and then you open it, and it's a fresh, big, huge pizza. Like, where is that science? Where is my Pizza the Hut oven baker? Because I want that. I don't need it. I want it. There were a lot of like I think Marty Jr. had on a VR headset, the glasses. I mean, I think you could actually count that as virtual reality, which they were very close because I think virtual reality came out in 2016, I think is when they first started really coming out. So it was pretty close, just like the Cubs with the World Series. Then you have, I'm trying to remember. There were some good points, like some of the things that I read about the series, I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. But I'm not going to write it down because that's a lot of information to read about. The other thing, too, is that with Back to the Future Part 1, when Eric Stoltz, because he was a method actor, the only time that he actually didn't want to be referred to as Marty was when, in between takes, when he was trying to flirt with Leah Thompson. I think oh man. It is late, my dudes. And I do not want to be here for 26 more minutes. Because it's almost 11:30 that I'll be here. So I think what I'm going to do is, because I have technically been here, I've been here about an hour, almost 2. Yeah, almost 2 hours. I got set up about, it was like 9:02. I started going live, I think. Might have been later. But next week, I am going to talk about the best Christmas movies to watch. After that, I won't have a radio show because it's going to be the last week of classes. And then we have finals. So I have a lot that I need to focus on. You guys do too. So I don't want to distract anybody. I don't want to distract myself when I could be doing things that I desperately need to do for classes. But I will probably see you guys next semester after next week's show. Just trying to figure out if I want to continue with the, what do you want to call it? If I want to continue talking about movies or if I want to find another subject. I could honestly, if I wanted to, I could sit here and talk about Queen for a whole semester. But that one radio show I had about Queen, I think was pretty good. We also had a discussion too. One of the girls in my radio class, we were talking about another girl too, talking about if they ever made a Prince movie, that if they don't make it right, it's going to be a riot. But I'll figure it out. I don't want to talk about comic books because I'm not I'm not that into comic books. So I might stick with movies. I don't really know. With music, it's kind of hit and miss because there's only so much I can tell you guys about, and then I'll be done in like 3 weeks because I'll talk myself about the entire history of music in one night. Like, I'll go all night talking about anything. But because it is late and I would like to sleep in and I have to move. Oh, do I want to move the clothes off my bed? No. I'm going to have to put them up. That's the only way to do it. But yeah, so it has been fun. We went on for about an hour and 40 minutes. So that's pretty good. So yeah, I will see you guys next week with the best Christmas movies. I'm going to talk about Elf, The Grinch, Home Alone, Love Actually, which is it's one of my favorite ones. I think Christmas with the Cranks is another one. That's a very underrated Christmas movie to me, honestly. So, I am going to bid you adieu. Take it easy out there. I am going into the wonderful 37-degree, cloudy, pitch black, dark coldness of this state. So yeah. I will see you guys next week, even though I have said that probably 4 or 5 times. So take it easy. Stay warm out there. And for my family out in Arizona, stay cold. I don't really know. It's pretty decent out there. So just stay what you are. But take it easy. And have a wonderful night. Peace out, everybody. Helps if I stop.